Well, let's get right into it. Today, we are unpacking a chilling, kind of darkly comedic ancient mariner's warning about the absolute most deceptive trap waiting out there in the uncharted seas. We're looking at a classic piece of lore regarding a creature so massive, so incredibly ancient, and so dangerous that it literally disguises itself as geography. So, buckle up as we explore the perilous slumber of Fastitocalon. To really grasp this explainer, we need to put ourselves right in the worn-out shoes of a crew of weary sailors. Picture it, you've been at sea for weeks, maybe months, surrounded by nothing but churning water, rough waves, sea salt in your eyes. And then your lookout shouts. You spot what looks like a bare, but wonderfully inviting island. The text perfectly captures that immediate, overwhelming sense of relief. An island good to land upon, although 'tis rather bare. To those sailors, it looks like an absolute oasis of salvation.
And the source material just perfectly captures the innocent, totally mundane desires of these travelers. The temptations are so simple. Come, leave the sea, and let us run or dance or lie down in the sun. I mean, these guys aren't looking to conquer new lands or find buried treasure. They just want a break from the sheer misery of ship life. They want relief from the endless seasickness and that constant biting wet of the ocean. It's a completely understandable, deeply human impulse, right? You just want to step off that boat and feel solid ground under your feet for 5 minutes.
But as we move into our first section, subtle warning signs, nature's clues, we start to see that things aren't quite what they seem.
Notice the stark contrast here between the foolish, desperate optimism of the sailors and the knowing, cynical strut of the local wildlife. The sailors look at this giant rock and see a safe haven. But the gulls sitting on this so-called island know the terrifying truth. In fact, the text explicitly interrupts the sailor's joy with a sudden, sharp command. Beware, gulls do not sink.
Think about it. These gulls, who don't sink and are perfectly safe bobbing on the water, are stationed there almost as a living, breathing warning sign. As the text tells us, they sit, they strut, and they prink. Their part it is to tip the wink. They know exactly what this island really is. They're tipping the wink, basically giving this sly, silent warning to anyone daring enough to approach, to settle down, or to try and get a brief respite from the wet. But yeah, the desperate, exhausted sailors, they ignore this completely.
Which brings us to our next section, triggering the beast, fatal mistakes.
This part brilliantly illustrates the ultimate tragic irony of the whole story. The fatal steps just unfold seamlessly. First, the sailors land on him. Then they tap their feet, running or dancing around just like they'd so deeply hoped to do. And finally, the ultimate mundane mistake. They proceed to trim little fires and hope perhaps for tea. Seriously, the comforting, incredibly ordinary act of boiling a kettle for a nice cup of tea is exactly what seals their doom. It really highlights the sheer foolishness of folks who just blindly assume this massive shape in the ocean is just a harmless piece of rock.
Because guys, this is no rock. The lore warns us that while his shell is incredibly thick and he appears to be in this deep, immovable slumber, this creature is anything but a passive island. The text stresses this point. He seems to sleep, but he is quick and floats now in the sea with guile. That word guile is absolutely vital here. This isn't just some dumb, lumbering animal. No, this is an apex predator laying a highly calculated, deceptive trap.
And that leads us right into Section 3, The Turtlefish Awakens. Fatal Consequences.
Just imagine the sheer terror of this moment for a second. What happens when the island feels the heat? The sailors are finally getting comfortable, stretching out. That little fire is just starting to crackle nicely for their tea. But deep down, beneath that thick, rocky shell, the beast hears the vibration of their tapping feet. And worse, he faintly feels the sudden, stinging heat of those little fires right upon his back. Boom! The trap has been triggered.
The poem reveals this darkly comedic yet utterly terrifying detail right here. When he feels that heat, the text tells us, with smile, he dives. It's not a panic response from the creature. He's not scared. It is totally deliberate. He's literally smiling. The deception worked perfectly, and now he casually executes his final lethal maneuver.
In a fraction of a second, the entire island just vanishes. Promptly turning upside down, he tips the unsuspecting sailors off into the churning ocean, and deep they drown. The text actually tells us they lose their silly lives to their surprise. It's a pretty harsh judgment on the sailors, calling their lives silly, but it really drives home the absolute foolishness of letting down your guard and ignoring those subtle warnings in such an unknown, dangerous world.
Let's zoom out a bit for our final section. Lore and final warnings. Ancient advice.
You see, this isn't just some random sea beast we're dealing with. This is Fastitocalon, often described in the lore as Old Horny, which refers to his rough, horned, practically impenetrable hide. The text states incredibly clearly that yes, there are many monsters in the sea, but absolutely none are so perilous as he. He's the last of the old turtlefish, a solitary survivor of an ancient mighty lineage whose kindred have all completely faded away into history. He's a relic of an older, far more dangerous age, making him the sea's ultimate, most cunning peril.
Because monsters exactly like this are out there, the text leaves us with a crystal-clear survival guide. If you wish to save your life, the advice is actually incredibly straightforward. Pay heed to sailors' ancient lore. Set foot on absolutely no uncharted shore. Or, even better still, the lore heavily suggests that the very best way to avoid a giant floating trap is to simply stay home. Fulfill your days at peace on Middle-earth, in mirth. Just don't go seeking unnecessary adventure in waters where the islands have a nasty habit of diving.
As we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this final vital command straight from the text. Be wise. We all face uncharted waters from time to time, right? Situations that seem almost too good to be true, offering us a convenient, easy place to rest and build our fires. So the question you really have to ask yourself is, when charting your own unknown, would you be wise enough to recognize the gulls' silent warning before your island decides to smile and dive?